Hello, this is Math 18, Section 1.7, the order of operations. So today we're going to look at using the order of operations to help us simplify expressions. So let's look at this first problem. 6 divided by 2 times 3. Well, you've got two operations there. You have division and multiplication. And the order that you do them in can give you two totally different answers. So let's say, for instance, that we decide to just work left to right and divide first. 6 divided by 2 would be 3 times 3, which would give you 9. But if we did the same problem and we decided to multiply first, and we did 2 times 3, that's 6, and 6 divided by 6 gives us 1. So you get two totally different answers. So the problem here was that they had to come up with one way of doing problems so that everybody would get the same answer. Makes it a lot easier to grade your test. So the whole idea here is called an order of operations, and basically it's an agreement. When you think about it, it's pretty cool. Everybody in the entire world has agreed to do their problems in this order. We can't agree on anything else, but we can agree on math, which is pretty cool. Of course, in a nerdy sense, but that's okay. So let's look at this order of operations. Here we've got 4 steps, okay? The first step is to do all of the operations inside grouping symbols. So grouping symbols include parentheses, brackets, braces, absolute value, and also the fraction bar. So before we go on, a lot of you probably learned about the order of operations, My Dear Aunt Sally, okay, and that's what you remembered. And that still holds true. You just have to be careful on steps 3 and 4 about which order you do them in. So, but if you remembered that, it was please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, and the P from please hopefully reminded you of parentheses. So that was step 1. Then step 2 was simplify exponential expressions, and that's where we get the excuse. The E stands for exponents, okay? All right, and the first one was parentheses. Now, steps 3 and 4 are very important about the way you do them. It says do multiplication and division as they occur from left to right. And a lot of people said, no, I don't remember that part. They're like, no, it's my dear, my dear. Well, sometimes it's dear my. Like if you think back to the first problem that we just did a minute ago, the correct answer was when we got the 9, when we divided first. So you have to do those in order from left to right. And so multiplication and division is where we get the my dear, okay, from please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And same thing with addition and subtraction as they occur left to right. And that's where we get Aunt Sally. So if it could have been Aunt Susan, I would be famous, but no, this lady had to be named Sally. So whatever. Now, a lot of people remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, but on test day, if you're sitting there going, excuse, I don't know what excuse stands for, it doesn't help you much. What a lot of people will do instead is write this, PEMDAS, okay, or however you want to say it. And that's your order of operations in a little bit shorter form. The P is for parentheses. The E is for exponents. You could write a little 2. The M is for multiplying. D is division, adding, and subtracting. Now, if that doesn't tell you what to do, pack it up and go home because you're clueless. No, I'm just kidding. It just means you need to study more. But just remember those last 4, the multiplying, dividing, and adding, subtracting, those are on the same step, so you have to do those left to right. Multiplying, dividing, left to right, adding, subtracting, left to right. So let's look at some problems. So here we have 21 minus 16 divided by 8 plus 2. So when you think about this, the first thing you would look for would be grouping symbols. Well, there aren't any. Okay? Step 2 of your order of operations is exponents, and there are no exponents. So we skip down to step 3, multiplying and dividing. Well, there is a division sign, so we're going to do the division. So bring down 21 and the minus sign. 16 divided by 8 is 2 plus 2. So now you have adding and subtracting left, and you work those left to right. So we're going to do 21 minus 2, which gives me 19, plus 2, which is 21. And that's your answer. So the cool thing about the order of operations is you can take problems that look really difficult and very involved, and you just work them step by step and you get down to your answer. So it's not that big of a deal because you're only doing one or two operations at the same time. All right, number 2, we have negative 4 squared minus 2 times, in parentheses, 3 minus 8. So we've got all kinds of stuff here. We have an exponent, subtraction. Actually, that 2 right beside those parentheses, that's multiplication. And we have subtraction within the parentheses. So basically, we're looking at the parentheses for two different operations. One, the first set of parentheses shows us because of the exponent, and the second set of parentheses are there to tell you to do that subtraction. So you can do both of those at the same time, or you could just start with the subtraction. Either way, we're going to do both at the same time. Now, if that freaks you out, you can just start with the second set of parentheses with the 3 minus 8. Either way. So we're going to work out negative 4 squared, negative 4 times negative 4, bring down minus 2, and all I'm going to do in this second parentheses is I'm going to change the sign because it's subtraction. We're going to do keep, change, opposite. So that 3 minus 8 becomes 3 plus negative 8, just like we did back in section 1.2 when we were, 1.3, whenever it was that we were subtracting integers. Keep, change, opposite. Okay? So now I can multiply my two 4's. Negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. And there's no other operation or anything there, so I can drop those parentheses. Now over here we're going to bring down minus 2, and in the parentheses 3 plus negative 8, the signs are different, so you subtract and keep the sign of the larger number, so that would be negative 5. Now notice that I kept the parentheses here. Because that 2 is right beside the parentheses, you have to keep those parentheses there because that operation is multiplication. So you have to keep that there until you multiply. Now, the next step, there's two different ways that you can do this. Probably the easiest, keeping with what we've been doing, is to keep this as a subtraction sign, 16 minus, and then you're going to multiply 2 times negative 5. So a positive times a negative is going to be a negative 10. And then you're left with subtraction. So we do keep, change, opposite on that last step. Okay, so that would be 16, we keep the same, change it to addition, and the opposite of negative 10 becomes positive 10. And 16 plus 10 gives me 26. So this first chapter we're mostly dealing with integers. So when you're doing these order of operation problems, if you end up with some crazy fraction somewhere, something's probably wrong. Okay, so just kind of keep that, in mind as you're doing your homework and quizzes. All right, number 3, we have division, subtraction, exponent, another subtraction, and another exponent. So think about your order of operations. The parentheses really are only there to just keep the exponents with those numbers. Okay, that's all. So we're really skipping down to exponents, to the second step. So we're going to keep 14 divided by 7 minus, now we're going to do 2 squared. So I'm going to work it off to the side. 2 times 2 is just plain old 4. Okay, bring down this minus sign. You don't change the signs for the subtraction yet because we aren't at the subtraction part of your order of operations. So the whole idea there is you don't do the subtraction until you get to that step in your order of operations. So what we're doing is we're going to multiply negative 8 times negative 8 there. Okay, so we have 14 divided by 7 minus 4 minus, now a negative times a negative, the signs are the same, that's going to be a positive 64. So that minus sign just came straight down. Okay, and we got a positive 64 from the 8s. Now we have division and subtraction. So the next step would be to divide. So 14 divided by 7 is 2. We bring down minus 4 minus 64. So now all you're left with is subtraction. So what I would do is go through and do keep, change, opposite with both of those subtraction signs. So we're going to keep the 2. Change it to addition. The opposite of 4 would become negative 4. Okay, that now becomes the keep number. Change the subtraction to addition, and the opposite of 64 would become negative 64. So, if you need help with changing those signs, go back to the section on subtracting integers. Okay, that's pretty rough stuff to get through, so be careful. Now I'm going to add my two negatives, the like signs. That would be negative 68 when I add negative 4 and negative 64, plus a positive 2. The signs are different, so I subtract and keep the sign of the larger number, which would give me negative 66. So it's a lot of steps, but really for the most part you're only doing one operation or at the most two operations in each step, and you just follow that order of operations all the way through. Okay, so number 4, we have 6 divided by, in brackets, 4 minus, in parentheses, 6 minus 8, parentheses brackets, minus 2 to the third. So here you have more than one grouping symbol. The rule is whenever you have more than one grouping symbol, these are called nested grouping symbols, and you always want to start with the innermost grouping symbol first and work your way out. So our innermost grouping symbol is the 6 minus 8. So we're going to bring down the 6 and the division sign and the bracket and the 4 and the minus sign. All I'm doing on this step is I'm going to change the signs with that 6 minus 8. So it's going to be keep the 6 plus, that's the change, negative 8 to take the opposite there. Okay, minus 2 to the third. All right, so all I did was change the signs in the parentheses. So now I want to work the problem that's in the parentheses, bring everything else down. 6 plus negative 8 we have to subtract and keep the larger sign, which would be negative 2. Now, the only reason that I kept that negative 2 in parentheses was to keep it separate from the minus sign in front of it. It just makes things a little bit easier to look at. So now we're working in the brackets, okay? So we're going to have the 6 and the division sign still comes down, and it's subtraction in the brackets. So I'm going to do keep, change, opposite on this problem right here. So the 4 we keep, plus, that's the change, and then the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. Minus 2 to the third. So notice that I keep bringing down the 6 and the 2 to the third all the way down. Sometimes people will just drop the number off and it just drops off the face of the earth. So be careful about bringing everything down step by step. So now we're basically still working on step 1 of the order of operations. We're still finishing the grouping symbol. So 6 divided by, I'm going to add 4 plus 2 gives me 6. I can finally get rid of those brackets there. Minus 2 to the third. So now let's kind of stop and look and see what we have. We have division, we have subtraction, and we have an exponent. So remember, we've done the grouping symbols finally. Okay, the next step down is exponent. So we have 6 divided by 6 minus 2 to the third. So remember, 2 to the third is 2 multiplied 3 times. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 would be 8. Okay? Now, division or subtraction. The next step would be division. 6 divided by 6 is 1, and we have 1 minus 8. So now we do one more changing of the signs with the subtraction. So keep the 1, change it to addition, take the opposite of 8 would be negative 8. And the last step, the signs are different, so we subtract and keep the larger sign. So that would be negative 7. Okay, now number 5 starts with a fraction, but you probably will not end up with a fraction as your answer. So that's still something you should be looking for. Remember, the fraction bar counts as a grouping symbol. So we want to simplify that fraction bar to just be either a single fraction or hopefully it'll cancel out to a whole number. That's the plan. So we bring down the 3. Okay, on top, we don't even need to change the sign. Just plain old subtraction. 15 minus 9 is 6. No big deal, just subtract it. Okay, on the bottom, you have an exponent and you have addition. So you're going to start with the exponent because that comes before addition in your order of operations. So 2 squared, 2 times 2 would be 4 plus 2. We'll work that out in a minute. Okay, bring everything else down. All right, so the 3 comes down again. and we still have 6 on top. On the bottom, 4 plus 2 is 6, and then still bring down minus 2. So now the next step is to simplify that fraction completely. That's division, remember. So we bring down the 3. 6 divided by 6 is 1, and then minus 2. So remember, when we get to this step, it says do addition and subtraction as they occur left to right. So we're going to start from the left. 3 plus 1 is 4, and 4 minus 2 is just 2. That's a nice problem. I like that. All right, I think we have one more and then you're off on your own for your U-tries. Okay, so here we have 4 and brackets 17 minus parentheses 9 minus 1, and then all of that divided by 12. So once again, we need to start in the parentheses because that's your innermost grouping symbol. So we're going to bring down the 4 and the 17 and the minus sign. Now, I am not changing the subtraction sign with that 9 minus 1. Because it's just plain old subtraction. Bigger number minus smaller number, nothing crazy. 9 minus 1 is 8. Just subtract it. Keep it simple. Okay? And I can drop those parentheses because there was nothing else to do with that parentheses there. So now look at the brackets. We're still in our grouping symbol. Remember your order of operations. Okay? So 17 minus 8, plain old subtraction. 17 minus 8 is 9. But here you have to keep the brackets there because that 4 is right beside those brackets, and that's understood to show multiplication. So you can't drop those brackets until you have actually multiplied there. Okay? Divided by 12. Keep bringing that down. So what we have left is multiplication and division, and the rule says do those as they occur left to right. Well, the multiplication comes first. So 4 times 9 is 36 divided by 12, which gives you 3. Not too bad. Alright, so now the rest of these are U-tries for you to try, so pause the video, try them on your own, and then you can check yourself. So number 1, we have 24 divided by 16, 24 minus 16, divided by negative 2 squared. So remember your order of operations. So we don't really have any parentheses except to just keep that square with the negative 2. So we're really stepping down to step 2 for exponents. So copy down 24 minus 16 and your division sign. Okay? Now if we square negative 2 times negative 2 is going to give you positive 4. So now we have subtraction or division. Well, the next step would be division. So we bring down the 24 and the minus sign. 16 divided by 4 is just 4. And now you just subtract. 24 minus 4 is 20. All right, number 2. We have 2 parentheses, 8 minus 4, the other parentheses, close parentheses, minus, in parentheses, negative 9 squared. So the 8 minus 4 is in parentheses, and we do need to do that operation first. Okay? And we're also going to look at that exponent on the negative 9 at the same time. So keep the 2 on the outside, and I'm just going to subtract. Keep it simple. 8 minus 4 is 4. So you have to keep the parentheses there to show multiplication. Bring down the minus sign, and then negative 9 times negative 9 is what we're working out on that exponent there. Okay? Oh, that 9 made a mess. Okay, so it's multiplication and subtraction and multiplication. So we can do the multiplications together at the same time. 2 times 4 is 8. Bring down your minus sign. And a negative 9 times a negative 9, even though that does not look like a negative 9, is a positive 81. Okay? So now we're left with subtraction. Since we are subtracting a bigger number, I am going to do keep, change, opposite there. Okay? So it's going to be 8, keep that, plus, change it to plus, and the opposite would be negative 81. So now the signs are different, so we have to subtract, keep the sign of the bigger number. So it's going to be a negative, and what the heck is that? Negative 73. And that would be it. All right, number 3. We have a lot of brackets and parentheses. 6 minus 5, and then in brackets 9 minus parentheses 6 minus 5, close the parentheses and brackets. So we're starting with the parentheses. That's with our innermost grouping symbol there. Excuse me. So 6 minus 5 is just plain old subtraction. And we're just going to subtract there. So 6 minus 5 is 1. So in the brackets, you still have 9 minus 1. Now notice, some people say, well, why can't we start with 6 minus 5 on the outside? That's totally wrong. That's just plain old subtraction. It's not in parentheses or anything. That's going to be one of the last subtractions that we do. So now we're working in the grouping symbol still in the brackets. So keep 6 minus 5, and 9 minus 1 is just 8. And I have to keep it in brackets because that 5 is right beside those brackets, which means multiplication. So now you're looking at, do you want to subtract or multiply? Multiply, right. So we have 6 minus 5 times 8 would be 40. And now we're left with subtraction, so we're going to do keep, change, opposite. 6 plus negative 40. Now the signs are different. So I subtract and keep the sign of the bigger number, which would be negative 34. Now, some of you may wonder, how come sometimes I put the number in parentheses, the negative number, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm just lazy and sometimes I'm not. So if it doesn't make any difference, if you put it in parentheses, that's awesome. If you don't, it's also okay. The main time that I really make sure that it's in parentheses is if we still have a minus sign in front for whatever reason. Then it's a lot simpler to keep it in parentheses to keep those two signs separate. All right, so let's look at number 4. Wow, this looks like a doozy. So we have fractions that we need to simplify, okay, and we also have division and another parentheses over here with 7 minus 2. So I want to simplify the fraction bar. On top, I have negative 16 plus negative 4. The signs are the same, so I'm going to just add and keep the sign. So that's going to give me negative 20 on top, okay? On the bottom, you have an exponent and you have subtraction. So you're going to do your exponent first. 5 squared, 5 times 5 would be 25, minus 29 on the bottom. Okay, bring down the division sign. And now 7 minus 2 is in parentheses, so we can do that right now at this step. Just go ahead and subtract. That's just 5, and you can drop those parentheses. Makes it a little bit simpler. Now back on that big fraction, we keep the negative 20 on top, but I need to change the signs on the bottom. So I'm going to keep the 25 plus, change it to plus, and take the opposite of 29. So that becomes negative 29. Keep divided by 5 over here out to the side. So I have negative 20. This is all crooked. Sorry about that. On the bottom, 25 plus negative 29, we have to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. So that would be negative 4 divided by 5. Okay? So our next step is to finally simplify that fraction. Negative 20 divided by negative 4. The signs are the same, so the answer is positive 5 divided by 5 gives you 1. It's a lot of work for just 1, huh? All right, number 5, the next one. So here we have some subtraction and some exponents. The main thing that will get people on this one is signs, so be careful. We're going to start with the negative 3 squared. So we're going to bring down 5 and the minus sign. Now off to the side you can do negative 3 times negative 3, and that's going to give you a positive 9. So I have 5 and minus, and then 9 takes the place of that negative 3 squared. Minus negative 5. Okay? So what we have left is subtraction all the way through. So I'm going to do same, keep, change, opposite twice. So the 5 stays, we keep that the same. Change it to addition. The opposite of 9 would be negative 9. That's now the keep negative 9, change it to addition, and the opposite of negative 5 is positive 5. Okay? So now I've got two positive numbers. I have 5 and 5 would be 10 plus negative 9, because I added those like signs, and now I have different signs. Remember, if the signs are different, subtract, keep the sign of the larger number. So that's going to be positive 1. Again. All right, number 6. I think this is our last one. And this is the end of chapter 1. Woohoo! Only 57 more to go. Just kidding. There's only 3 more chapters. All right, so here we have 16 minus 32 divided by 2 to the third. So let's see. We're going to start with the exponent, right? Okay. So we need to work out 2 to the third. Remember, 2 times 2 times 2. So we bring down everything else and the division sign. Remember, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 would be 8. Now, subtract or divide. Right, division. So we have 16 and the minus sign comes down. 32 divided by 8 would be 4. And now we just subtract. 16 minus 4 is 12. And that is it for section 1.7.